I never thought I'd be the one holding secrets that could tear a family apart. But there I was, standing on my sister's front porch in suburban Kansas, clutching a pie and a letter that had no business existing. My name's Susan Thompson, and I'm 45. To anyone on the outside, my life looks picture perfect. Married for 20 years, 2 kids in college, a cozy teaching job, and a house with a picket fence. But life's messy behind the scenes, isn't it? Especially when you're part of a family that's as complicated as mine. It all started 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, when I got a call from my mom. "Susan, honey, are you sitting down?" she asked, her voice wavering. That wasn't like her. Mom's the matriarch, the glue of our family. "Mom, what's wrong?" I asked, already bracing myself for bad news. "Your father, he wants to come to Thanksgiving this year," she said. I nearly dropped my phone. My father hadn't been to a family event in 25 years. He walked out when I was 20, leaving my mom to raise me and my younger sister, Rachel, on her own. The divorce wasn't messy, it was just cold. He moved to Florida, remarried, and sent the occasional birthday card with a signature so stiff it could have been written by a stranger. "Why now?" I asked. "He says he has something important to tell everyone," Mom said. I didn't want to say no, but I wanted to warn you. 2 weeks later, I found myself pulling into Rachel's driveway with a pit in my stomach. Rachel had always been the golden child, perfect grades, perfect marriage, perfect house. She made hosting Thanksgiving look effortless. Me? I barely managed to bring a store-bought pie. When I walked in, the house smelled like roasted turkey and cinnamon. Rachel greeted me with her trademark smile, but it faltered when she saw my face. "What's wrong, Susan?" she asked, leading me to the kitchen. "Dad's coming," I whispered. Her eyes widened, and she froze mid-stir of the gravy. "Wait. Our dad? The one who forgot my high school graduation? That dad?" I nodded. "Mom said he has something to tell us." Rachel sighed and poured herself a glass of wine. "Well, this should be fun." Thanksgiving dinner started off awkwardly. Dad sat at the far end of the table, next to Mom, who looked like she'd rather be anywhere else. My husband, Mike, made small talk about football, and Rachel's husband, Greg, kept the kids entertained with bad dad jokes. But the tension was palpable. Everyone was waiting for Dad to drop his bombshell. Finally, after dessert, he cleared his throat. I want to thank you all for letting me be here," he began, avoiding eye contact. "There's something I need to tell you." Here it comes, I thought. Maybe he was dying. Maybe he wanted to apologize for being an absentee father. But nothing could have prepared me for what he actually said. "I have another daughter," he announced. The room went silent. You could have heard a pin drop. "Excuse me?" Rachel said, her voice sharp. "She's 22, Dad continued, his voice cracking. "Her name is Emily. I met her mother after I left. I wanted to tell you all sooner, but you think now is the right time?" Rachel snapped, standing up. "At Thanksgiving? In front of our kids?" "Rachel," Mom said softly, placing a hand on her arm. "No, Mom," Rachel shot back. "He doesn't get to waltz back into our lives and drop this on us like it's no big deal." Meanwhile, I just sat there, frozen. Another daughter. A half-sister. My mind raced with questions. Did she know about us? What did she look like? Was she anything like Rachel or me? After Dad left that night, the family was in shambles. Rachel refused to talk to him. Mom tried to play mediator, but she was just as hurt as the rest of us. I couldn't stop thinking about Emily. So, I did something I probably shouldn't have. I looked her up on Facebook. Her profile was public. She looked like a younger version of me, same brown hair, same stubborn chin. She was a nursing student in Florida, and her posts were full of sunny beach photos and cheerful captions. I stared at her picture for what felt like hours, debating whether to reach out. In the end, curiosity won. I sent her a message. Emily responded almost immediately. She said she'd known about us for years but never felt it was her place to reach out. She wanted to meet. I didn't tell Rachel or Mom. I didn't want to stir up more drama. Instead, I flew to Florida the next weekend under the guise of a work trip. Meeting Emily was surreal. She was sweet, smart, and funny, a lot like Rachel, actually. But she was also nervous, constantly apologizing for intruding on our family. "It's not your fault," I told her. "He's the one who kept us in the dark." We spent hours talking, and by the end of the weekend, I felt like I'd gained a sister. But when I got home, the guilt hit me like a freight train. I had betrayed Rachel and Mom by going behind their backs. The truth came out a week later. During a family meeting, Rachel had called to process everything. I tried to keep my secret, but Rachel has a sixth sense for sniffing out lies. "You met her, didn't you?" she accused, glaring at me across the living room. I nodded, feeling like a scolded child. I had to. I needed to know. "And?" Mom asked, her voice trembling. She's lovely," I admitted. "She's not the enemy, Rachel. She's just as lost in this as we are." Rachel stormed out, slamming the door behind her. Mom sat quietly, tears streaming down her face. I felt like the worst daughter in the world. It took months for the dust to settle. Rachel eventually came around, though she's still wary of Emily. Mom surprised us all by reaching out to her first, inviting her to visit. As for Dad? He's trying, in his clumsy way, to make amends. It'll never be perfect, but what family is? Now, a year later, Emily is part of our lives. She came to Thanksgiving this year, and Rachel even gave her a warm hug. It's not the ending I expected, but it's one I'm grateful for. Life's messy, but sometimes, out of that mess, something beautiful can grow. And if there's one thing I've learned, it's this: family isn't just who you're born to, it's who you choose to love. Flaws and all. As the months passed, Emily became more than just a half-sister, she became a bridge in our fractured family. She had this way about her, soft-spoken but determined, that made you want to root for her. She didn't try too hard, didn't force herself into our lives, but little by little, she just fit. Rachel was the hardest nut to crack, of course. She's always been the protector of our family, the one who takes on everyone else's problems like a shield maiden. For her, Emily represented everything she had to fight through: the abandonment, the unanswered questions, the years we spent watching Mom pretend she was fine when she clearly wasn't. But even Rachel couldn't resist Emily's quiet persistence. The turning point came at one of Rachel's daughter's soccer games. Emily had come to visit for the weekend, and she shyly asked if she could tag along. I could see Rachel tense up when Emily arrived, but she didn't say anything. By the second half, the two of them were standing side by side, yelling at the ref for a bad call like they'd been sisters forever. "I think that's the first time I've seen Rachel smile around her," I whispered to Mike. "Miracles happen," he said with a grin, nudging me. "Maybe you should tell her that." But it wasn't all smooth sailing. As much as Emily's presence began to heal some of the wounds, it also opened new ones, mainly with Dad. It was obvious he thought Emily's arrival would be his redemption arc, a way to make up for the 25 years he spent absent. He started calling more often, showing up uninvited, and generally inserting himself into our lives in a way that felt forced. One night, after dinner at my place, Rachel finally let him have it. "You don't get to just waltz back in and pretend you're the doting father," she said, her voice shaking with barely contained anger. "You weren't there when Mom worked 3 jobs to keep the lights on. You weren't there when Susan and I cried ourselves to sleep, wondering why you didn't want us. You don't get to skip all the hard stuff and just show up for the good." Dad sat there, stunned. For a moment, I thought he might actually apologize. But instead, he just sighed and said, "I'm trying, Rachel." "Try harder," she snapped, storming out of the room. Despite Dad's clumsy attempts, Emily's bond with us grew stronger. She had this incredible ability to see the good in people, even when they didn't deserve it. She reminded me of Rachel in that way, stubbornly hopeful. But unlike Rachel, she didn't carry the weight of the past on her shoulders. She came into our lives fresh, unburdened by old scars, and in doing so, she helped us see each other in a new light. By the time Christmas rolled around, Emily had become a fixture in our family. She joined us for our annual tree decorating night, where we argued over whose turn it was to put the angel on top. Rachel's youngest, Lily, insisted it should be Emily's turn. "But she's new." Rachel's older son, Ethan, argued. "So what?" "She's family," Lily said, crossing her arms in a way that reminded me of Rachel at that age. Emily looked like she might cry. "Are you sure?" she asked, glancing at Rachel. Rachel hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Go ahead." It was a small moment, but it felt monumental. Watching Emily place that angel on the tree, I realized how far we'd come. A year ago, we were a broken family, held together by habit and history. Now, we were something new, still messy, still complicated, but stronger for it. As for Dad, well, he's still a work in progress. He's made an effort to show up, to apologize, to listen. It's not perfect, and I don't know if it ever will be. But for the first time in years, I see glimpses of the man I remember from my childhood, the man who taught me to ride a bike, who made pancakes on Saturday mornings, who used to make my mom laugh so hard she cried. Maybe forgiveness isn't a destination. Maybe it's a journey, one you have to take step by step, over and over again. Last weekend, we had a big family barbecue at Rachel's house. The kids ran around the yard, the men stood around the grill arguing about the best way to cook ribs, and Mom sat in a lawn chair, sipping sweet tea and looking more at peace than I'd seen her in years. Emily and Rachel were in the kitchen, laughing over some inside joke, while Dad awkwardly tried to teach Ethan how to throw a spiral. As I watched them all, I felt this strange mix of emotions, grief for the years we lost, gratitude for the time we still had, and hope for whatever came next. Life had thrown us curveballs, sure. But somehow, we'd managed to catch them and keep going. And isn't that what family is all about? As the barbecue wound down and the golden Kansas sunset painted the sky, Rachel and Emily stepped outside with a platter of brownies. Rachel's laugh floated through the air, and I couldn't help but marvel at the transformation. A year ago, she wouldn't have even acknowledged Emily, let alone joked with her like a lifelong friend. But just when I thought the day couldn't get any more surreal, Dad cleared his throat and tapped a glass with a fork, drawing everyone's attention. He started, looking more uncomfortable than usual. "I have something I want to say." A hush fell over the yard. Even the kids quieted down, sensing the weight of the moment. Rachel crossed her arms and raised an eyebrow, clearly bracing for impact. "I know I've been a terrible father," Dad said, his voice thick with emotion. "And I know that words don't mean much after all the years I missed. But I want you all to know how much I regret the pain I caused." His eyes swept over the group, lingering on Mom, then Rachel, then me, and finally Emily. "You didn't deserve that. None of you did. And if I could go back and change things, I would. But since I can't, I just want to spend whatever time I have left trying to make it up to you." Rachel's expression softened, though she didn't say anything. Mom dabbed at her eyes with a napkin. Emily looked like she wanted to run up and hug him, but she held back, perhaps out of respect for the fragile dynamics still at play. "I know it's going to take time," Dad continued, his voice breaking. "But I hope, someday, you can find it in your hearts to forgive me." The silence that followed was deafening. I could see the struggle on Rachel's face, her pride warring with her longing to heal. It was Emily who broke the tension. "I forgive you," she said quietly, her voice steady. "For what it's worth." Dad looked at her, his face crumpling with gratitude. Thank you, he whispered. Rachel let out a heavy sigh, then uncrossed her arms. I'm not there yet, she said, her tone softer than I expected. But I'm willing to try. It wasn't a grand gesture, but it was enough. Dad nodded, his eyes glistening, and for the first time in years, it felt like we were all moving forward, slowly, awkwardly, but together. Later that evening, as we packed up to leave, Emily pulled me aside. Do you think I'll ever really fit in? She asked, her voice tinged with uncertainty. You already do, I said without hesitation. You didn't just become part of this family, you helped rebuild it. And that's not something any of us will forget. She smiled, a mix of relief and happiness, and hugged me tightly. In that moment, I realized how much she had come to mean to me, not just as a sister, but as a friend, an ally, and a piece of the puzzle we didn't even know we were missing. Over the next few months, life settled into a new rhythm. Emily visited more often, and Rachel started calling her regularly to swap recipes and parenting advice. Mom even started including her in her annual Christmas card, something that felt like a quiet but profound acknowledgement of her place in our family. Dad, true to his word, began showing up, not just physically but emotionally. He helped Rachel's kids with school projects, attended my son's college graduation, and even started taking Mom out to lunch once a week. It wasn't a reconciliation, they were long past that, but it was a friendship, and that was enough. One night, as I sat on my back porch sipping a glass of wine, Rachel called. Do you think we'll ever stop being mad at him? She asked, skipping the usual pleasantries. I thought about it for a moment. Maybe. But I think the anger will fade long before the scars do. Yeah, she said, her voice thoughtful. But scars aren't always bad, are they? They're just proof that you've healed. I smiled, knowing how far we'd come. Exactly. This Thanksgiving, we're hosting again. All of us is Rachel, Emily, Mom, Dad, the kids, even Mike, who's already planning his dad jokes for the day. It won't be perfect, it never is. But it'll be real, and that's more than I ever thought we'd have. Sometimes, life surprises you. Sometimes, the family you thought was broken beyond repair finds a way to put itself back together. And sometimes, the pieces don't fit quite the same as they used to. But in their own messy, beautiful way, they make something stronger. Something worth holding on to. And if I've learned anything from all of this, it's that love, forgiveness, and second chances aren't just gifts, they're choices. Choices we have to make every single day. And for my family? I'm choosing them. Always. Thanksgiving Day arrived, and for the first time in years, I wasn't dreading the gathering. I wasn't nervously rehearsing conversations in my head or bracing for awkward silences. This time, I felt ready. Maybe even excited. It was a strange, unfamiliar feeling, but I welcomed it. Rachel was already bustling around the kitchen when I arrived with Mike. The smell of turkey roasting in the oven filled the house, mingling with the scent of fresh apple pie. Emily was helping set the table, her movements confident now, as if she'd always been part of this ritual. Dad was sitting in the living room with Mom, flipping through an old photo album and laughing over a picture of Rachel and me dressed as clowns for Halloween. It was ordinary and extraordinary all at once. A year ago, this scene would have been impossible. Now, it felt like a gift. As we sat around the table, Rachel did the honors of carving the turkey. Dad poured wine for the adults, and Emily passed around the rolls, laughing at a joke Ethan made. Lily insisted on saying grace, her sweet, high-pitched voice filling the room with gratitude for her family and the best mashed potatoes in the world. We went around the table, each of us sharing something we were thankful for. When it was Emily's turn, she hesitated, glancing at Rachel and then at me. I'm thankful for this family, she said, her voice steady but thick with emotion. For giving me a chance to be part of something I never thought I'd have. Rachel reached over and squeezed her hand. It wasn't a grand gesture, but it was enough. When it was Dad's turn, he cleared his throat and looked around the table. I'm thankful for all of you, he said. For letting me come back. For letting me try. Rachel didn't say anything, but I saw her eyes soften. The room was quiet for a moment, and in that silence, I felt the weight of all we'd been through, the pain, the anger, the loss, but also the strength it took to get here. After dinner, we all pitched in to clean up. The kids ran off to play video games, and the adults gathered in the living room with coffee and dessert. Emily sat next to Rachel on the couch, the two of them sharing a blanket like sisters who had grown up together. Mom looked content, sipping her tea with a smile that spoke volumes. And Dad, for once, didn't try too hard. He just was. Present, quiet, and grateful. As the night wound down, I stepped outside to get some air. The sky was clear, the stars twinkling against the cold, crisp air. Emily joined me a few minutes later, wrapping her coat tightly around her. Thank you, she said softly, leaning on the porch railing. For what? I asked, though I already knew. For letting me in. For fighting for this, she said. I know it wasn't easy. I smiled. Families are messy. But the good ones are worth the mess. She nodded, her eyes shining. You think it'll always be like this? I thought about it for a moment. No, I said honestly. There'll be bumps, arguments, maybe even setbacks. But we've made it this far, haven't we? She smiled. Yeah. We have. That night, as I lay in bed, I thought about the journey we'd been on. A year ago, I didn't think I had room in my life for Emily, or for Dad, for that matter. But they'd found a way in, not by erasing the past, but by helping us build a new future. One filled with scars, yes, but also love, forgiveness, and hope. Families aren't perfect. They're messy, complicated, and sometimes downright infuriating. But they're also where you find strength, growth, and the people who show up when it matters most. As I drifted off to sleep, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, peace. Not the kind that comes from everything being perfect, but the kind that comes from knowing you're exactly where you're meant to be. And for the first time, I wasn't just hopeful for the future, I was excited to see where it would take us. Together. Always.